Hello, I'm Marletha, and on behalf of my research partner Armando, welcome to Snowden Chronicles. On this channel, we aren't just looking at names and dates on a page. We're digging deep into our own family roots, breathing life into our ancestors, and piecing together the puzzle of who we are. But we're also showing you how to do it, from decoding centuries-old court records and brick wall census data to capturing the priceless oral histories of our elders before they're lost. We're breaking down the exact investigative tools and strategies you need to uncover your own history. Because history isn't just something found in textbooks, it's in your bloodline. Subscribe to Snowden Chronicles, grab your magnifying glasses, and let's start hunting for the past together. In our last few videos, we started unraveling the fascinating, complex history of the Morse family. We discovered that they were free-born Black Americans living in a deeply divided pre-Civil War South. If you watch our video titled, "The Law That Made Our Ancestor a Blacksmith," you'll remember the specific twist of fate that shaped the life of the family patriarch, Malachi Morse. Because of strict laws of the time, the exact circumstance of his birth labeled him with a heavy title, illegitimate. Let's do a very quick recap of how we got here. Through records uncovered, thanks to the incredible Virginia Untold Project, we know that Malachi was born to an African American mother who was legally free at the time of his birth. But what the documents don't tell us is the exact situation of Malachi's father. Based on historical context, we are assuming that his father was likely an enslaved man. Now, back then, the legal system followed a brutal but simple rule. The status of the child followed the status of the mother. Because his mother was free, Malachi was legally free from the moment he drew his first breath. But here was the catch. If Malachi's father was indeed enslaved and married to Malachi's mother, the law simply refused to recognize that marriage. In the eyes of the courts, he had no legal father. This defined Malachi as freeborn but legally illegitimate. And that specific title of illegitimate is exactly what allowed the local government to force him into becoming an indentured servant at just 18 years old, binding him to a master to learn blacksmithing. That was Malachi's path, forced into a career by the law. But what happens when we look at the next generation? Today, we're tracing a line forward to look at Malachi's oldest son, William. And as you're about to see, being born free in the 1840s looked very different for a son than it did for his father. To understand William's status, we first have to talk about his mother, Prudence. To this day, we're still struggling to piece together Prudence's exact origins. Record keeping for free people of color in the antebellum South was notoriously sparse, making her early life a massive puzzle we're still trying to solve. But despite the missing pieces, we know the most critical part of her history. When her children were born, 9 times out of 10, Prudence must have been a free woman. Think about the stakes here. If Prudence had been enslaved when her children were born, those children, by law, would have automatically become the property of her legal owner. They would have been born into bondage, vulnerable to being sold away, regardless of Malachi's free status. The fact that her children lived as free individuals tells us everything we need to know about Prudence's legal standing, even if the paper trail is faint. This incredible, complex legal landscape and how Prudence navigated it is so deep, we're going to dedicate an entire separate video to it. But for today, our focus narrows onto Prudence and Malachi's very first son, William Morse. William Morse, like his father Malachi, was born free. But unlike his father, William carried a massive legal advantage. He was considered both legitimate and freeborn. Because Malachi and Prudence were both free, their marriage and their family unit held a different legal weight. For William, this meant a world of difference. On paper, it meant he actually had a choice in his career path. Unlike his father, who was forced into blacksmithing by the courts due to his illegitimacy, the law didn't dictate William's job. He wasn't forced into involuntary indenture at age 18. He was, in a sense, a master of his own destiny. But what did that destiny actually look like for a young black man in 1860? To find out, we have to look at the primary document, specifically the 1860 U.S. Federal Census. According to the census records, by 1860, William was working as a shingle maker. He was born around 1840, making him approximately 20 years old when the census taker knocked on their door. Let's paint a picture of a life at 20. The census shows he was still living at home with his parents, Malachi and Prudence, and his younger siblings. When you look across the columns of that census sheet under personal estate value, William's line is blank. He owned no property. He had no personal estate to his name. Furthermore, the census notes that William was illiterate, unable to read or write, just like his parents. The records also state he was born in North Carolina. Based on geographical research of where the film was located, we are highly confident he was born at Mackey's Ferry. Now, being a shingle maker at Mackey's Ferry makes perfect sense when you look at the geography. Mackey's Ferry sits right near the Albemarle Sound, surrounded by vast, dense cypress and cedar swamps. In the 19th century, shingle making was a massive, brutal industry in these wetlands. Workers would head deep into the swamps, fell giant cypress trees, split the logs with specialized tools to create wooden roofing shingles by hand. It was grueling, exhausting, back-breaking labor. It required immense physical strength, endurance, and a tolerance for the hazardous, mosquito-ridden swamplands. So on one hand, William had a choice. He wasn't legally bound to a blacksmith forge like his father had been. He chose the swamps. He chose to make shingles. But this is where the difference between father and son completely grind to a halt. Because while William's status was cleaner than his father's on paper, the world they walked out into every single day was exactly the same. Freedom for a black man in Antebellum, North Carolina, was never truly free. William and his father Malachi were both violently restricted by a rigid set of racial laws designed to keep them beneath the status of white citizens. By law, a free black family like the Morses lived under a cloud of constant surveillance and restriction. Let's look at the actual laws William and Malachi had to live by every single day, pulled right from the North Carolina Revised Statutes. First, they could not travel or relocate freely. If William wanted to take his shingles across state lines or even move counties to find better buyers, the law intentionally blocked him. North Carolina law strictly dictated, "It shall not be lawful for any free Negro or mulatto to migrate into the state." If a free person left the state for too long, they were legally banned from ever returning home. They were required to carry official freedom papers at all times. If a white person demanded to see those papers and William couldn't produce them, he could be jailed as a suspected runaway slave. Second, despite being freeborn and paying taxes, William had absolutely no political or legal voice. Following the constitutional changes of 1835, free black men were stripped of the right to vote. Even worse, they could not defend themselves in a courtroom. The law explicitly stated that a person of color could only testify if the case exclusively involved other people of color. If a white merchant cheated William out of his hard-earned money for a shipment of shingles, the law text was absolute. In all other civil and criminal cases, such evidence shall be deemed inadmissible. The legal system was completely weaponized to keep him powerless. Third, there was the constant threat of vagrancy laws. If a free black man was found without steady employment, the local courts could label him a vagrant, arrest him, and literally auction off his labor to the highest bidder. This meant William's choice to be a shingle maker wasn't just a career preference, it was a survival strategy. He had to keep working, no matter how brutal the swamps were, to keep the state from seizing his freedom. And finally, there was a barrier to education. In North Carolina, following the slave rebellions of the 1830s, it was made strictly illegal to teach black people, enslaved or free, how to read and write. The state legislature openly declared that teaching literacy to free black people had a tendency to excite dissatisfaction in their minds. This explains why William, despite being born free and legitimate, was still illiterate in 1860. The law intentionally locked him out of literacy to ensure he could never easily read the very laws used to oppress him, nor easily run a complex business of his own. When you look at it through the lens, William's choice becomes a lot more complicated. He wasn't forced into a trade by indenture law like Malachi, but he was forced into manual labor by a system that left him with no other options. The story of William Morse shows us the razor-thin line between slavery and freedom in the American South. William was freeborn. He was legitimate. He lived with his loving family at Mackey's Ferry. He went to work by his own volition into the cypress swamps every day to build a life. But he did all of this while navigating a system that viewed his very existence as a threat. Tracing the Morse family history isn't just about finding names and dates on a census page. It's about understanding the resilience it took to survive, to keep a family together, and to pass freedom down to the next generation, dollar by dollar, shingle by shingle. As we continue to dig deeper into the archives, and we are uncovering more about the Morse family push through these oppressive laws, in our next video we are going to deep dive into the mystery of prudence, looking at how a free black woman navigated this dangerous world to protect her children. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below about what surprised you most about William's story. And give this video a thumbs up if you want to help us bring more of our ancestors' history to light. God bless. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.